Hey, fellow rail modelers, back again for another fun adventure in the storage unit. I got the layout diagram pasted down to my bench work yesterday. Today I'm going to start playing around with aligning some rails and switches, and might even get into installing some rail today. But first of all, I want to talk to you about the rails and switches, turnouts that I'll be using. I don't know if you can see that or not. There we go. So I built this one day at the camper, just as a test bed to see how I wanted to operate these turnouts on this railroad. With the idea of I'm trying to keep it simple. I knew from the get-go that I don't want to use switch machines. I don't want to wire any electronics that I don't have to wire. I don't mind hand throwing switches at all, and might indeed do that on a few of these switches. But what I did here was I just took a piece of scrap plywood and installed some foam on it, and I got online and I ordered just a bunch of gadgets and gizmos, for lack of a better description. I got some silicone tubing, I got some cabling and rods of different sizes. So I set this up to try to determine if I could engineer a very simple switch mechanism for these turnouts. And what I came up with was these little knobs. I know I've seen many of you have similar systems on your own railroads, but I've never really seen a tutorial on how to do it, how to make it work. But I got these knobs, and they come with a threaded. This is all threaded here, okay? But that's as long as they are. So I had to come up with a way to connect this to a longer rod that could then operate the turnout mechanism. By the way, I'm using Pico switches and Pico track. I know microengineering makes a great product, but the deciding factor for me with Pico over microengineering is that Pico switches are sprung, and I really like that. I used that in my HO layout and loved it. I hand threw all of those switches. I did install some Caboose Industry ground throws, and that made it even more fun. But these turnouts that are sprung just lock into place so well. And if you're not using a switch machine, you really need a way to lock those things in. So I built this with switches, and I was going to do it in 3 or 4 different angles to see what it might take to control these from the front of the layout, even if they were not aligned in a logical way to the front of the layout. So I built this big enough to have several turnouts installed, but I was satisfied with the first 2 that I did, so I really didn't go any further because everything worked amazingly simply well. If a turnout is aligned this way, it's a simple mechanism of that. That's all it is. Just a back and forth action. You can probably hear it flipping on the other side. If a turnout is aligned in this direction or any similar direction that's not parallel to the front of the fascia, then you've got to have some sort of a actuator there that transfers the action in 2 different directions. And this is not fancy because it's got a ball on it. This is one of the knobs that I bought just to experiment with and see if I wanted to push-pull with those knobs, but I couldn't get that little system to line up with anything else, so I ended up not using that, but I needed a little nut to keep this in place. So I just threw that on there. I can use any kind of nut that I want to, but I think you can see what's going on there. It's just a simple 90-degree angle turn, and it works really, really well. And so I learned from this, which is what I always try to do. I try to learn how these mechanisms are going to work before I even lay out the track, and because I don't want to get into a situation where I can't fix something or can't make something work. So I'll show you this from the front as I throw this switch. That's easy enough to see that that's flipping that one, and then this to that one down below. So I'm very happy with that. What I did learn that I will do when I actually install this is I've got to have a deeper cutout or a wider cutout here. It's not impossible, but it's a pain to get your fingers around that knob inside that hole. So my cutout probably needs to be, I would say, at least a ½ inch larger in diameter. The bottom of my layout, I guess you see I'm not using risers. It's all going to be a plywood base, at least for this initial modular section. So I'll have this plywood base to make all these mountings on. So the first thing I'm going to do after I lay the track is I'm going to lift this this top up, and I'm going to work on the underside, and I'm going to get all these switch mechanisms working before I ever start wiring. If I ever start wiring, as I mentioned before, it is a dead rail capable layout, and I'm perfectly capable of running most of my locomotives dead rail, so I don't have to wire anything. But as I mentioned before, I probably will, just so that I can run other equipment as well. Probably install some form of DCC into this. Also, if I pull any passenger cars or lighted cabooses, there's other reasons to want to have a little power to the rails. So that's what I wanted to talk about before I get into actually laying this track. And some of you may be asking, am I going to lay the track right on top of this paper? The paper I sprayed with Gorilla Glue spray adhesive, and it worked out really well. It stayed flexible enough that I could adjust everything around and get it lined up reasonably well. Came back this morning just to see how well it had stuck, and it has stuck well, but not well enough to substantially hold down this track. So what I'm going to do, and that's what I really thought I was going to do, I'm going to come back with my razor knife, and I'm just going to simply cut down the edges of this track diagram and then pull up this center piece so that I expose the foam underneath, and that should give me enough adhesion surface to hold this track without distorting the purpose of the whole thing in the first place, which was to make my track alignment. So if I cut down the sides, I'll still have these little marks that show me where the connections are that I made. Now that's not a necessary connection there, but these connections at the switches, it'll show me exactly how to line up my switches so that I'm sorry, I keep saying switches, but turnouts. I called them switches most of my life, so it's an old habit. And you'll also notice this is fairly deep. This particular unit is 31 inches across, which is pretty much the maximum of my reach at this level. By the way, it is 52 inches high. That's another thing I wanted to do in building this first unit, was to make sure that I had chosen a good height for it. It feels a little high to me, but we'll see. I can always go back and cut this rolling base down a few inches if I need to, but I'm going to play with it at this height and see if I like it. I don't dislike it. It's just higher than I imagined that it would be. But I've also designed pretty much this entire layout so that all of my turnout work is on the front half of this. So the back side is mostly just trees, scenery, buildings, and whatnot. So I could very easily, I can reach every one of these switches if I just want to hand throw them. But I like the idea of throwing them with the knobs on the front of the fascia board. So I'm probably going to use that method. So I'm going to move things around, and I'm going to come back, and I'm going, in the meantime, I'm going to cut out these rails like I described, and maybe start laying some track today. So next step, I've taken my pencil and basically marked each of these turnouts right where the pin will go through for my switching mechanism. So what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take out this little square chunk of styrofoam and take out that whole square there, and grab a different knife here and just push straight down through it. Cut it on all four sides. I haven't glued the styrofoam down yet. I'm going to use liquid nails to glue it down to my plywood top after I get this step done. But I left it unglued just so I wouldn't have any glue in any of these places. So just dig it out with a little screwdriver. Come back and clean it up with a shop vac in a few minutes. But what I'm going to end up with is just a little square cavity there all the way down to the plywood, which is what I did on that proof table that I made to make sure that these switch mechanisms were going to work properly. So just going to clear that out so there's no obstruction anywhere through there. And then I'll come back with my long drill bit and I'll make an oblong hole on the bottom of each of these. And when I put this back in place, I'll have freedom of movement there to flip this back and forth with my fascia mounted switch mechanism. So give me a few minutes, I'll get the rest of these done and we'll continue from there. Okay, so everything's cut out for the turnouts. And then I took a 1/2-inch drill bit and I drilled right down through the center of each of those squares that I cut out. 1/2 inch is a good enough clearance for the throw of the switch mechanism back and forth. So hopefully I've got those centered in there well enough that I won't have to go back. But if I do have to go back, it's just a matter of enlarging the hole a little bit. And I'll show you, since this thing lifts up, this is where I'll be working for the next little while on all of these holes. When I was building this and framing it, there was a section right here that I needed to put this little framing piece, and I knew it was going to be close to that switch opening, and luckily enough, it turned out just right. I can get one in there easily. But all these little openings are where I'm going to be running one of those tubes and cables to. So that's my next plan of action, is to probably go ahead and mount these turnouts. In the case of these turnouts, they have the very small sections of track in between. I'll probably mount those small sections of track as well, there and there, because I know it'll be hard to get those sections in there after I've mounted the turnouts. But I'm going to mount the turnouts and get them in place with some liquid adhesive, and then I'll come back and I'll start. It's going to take me a while on this next part, but I'll come back and I will engineer all of my cable throws, tubes, and cut my openings in the fascia for my pull knobs. That will be in the next video or two. Glad you're watching this. Glad you're with me. Please don't be afraid to comment. I don't know all the answers, but I am trying to learn. I'm trying to learn along the way. And let me mention this too before I go. Modularity in building these railroads. I did this with my HO layout and I really enjoy it. And not because it's transportable. Yeah, it's transportable. That's great. And I never intend to hold an operating session in this lowly little storage unit that I'm in. So someday I'll move this to a more permanent location, and I will keep adding to it one module at a time until I have built the railroad that I fully intend to build before it's over with. But let me talk about modularity. And I love this. And some guys I've seen on forums that like to, they like to have the whole thing up and running so they can run the trains the entire length of the build. I, on the other hand, love every aspect of the building process, and I don't want it to end necessarily, just after it's begun. I don't want to lay all my track at once and then come back and do all my turnouts and then come back and do all my wiring and then all of my painting and structures and so forth. So my full intention is that before I start module number 2, this entire module will be complete structurally. It'll be complete with foliage, trees, you name it. It'll be fully operational. I could do an operation session on this module by itself, and then I'll get to experience the whole thing over again when I start module number 2, and then the same with module number 3, etc., etc. It's like building a bunch of railroad layouts, which that's what it's all about. I understand operating and running the trains, but that's just one small part of it, and I do love the building part. So that's what I think is the number one reason to consider doing something modular like this. Don't get it all done at once. Enjoy the process. I'm going to be enjoying this process for years to come. Look forward to it.